Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode. And as we come together, I urge us to take a moment and think about why we are part of a Goldilocks community and why are we getting together and building something together in a way that we can all benefit from. Think about what Goldilocks conjures up in your memory. To me, as a little girl, as I read Goldilocks, I kept thinking, how cool is that? While she's a little girl, she knows exactly what she wants. She wants to make sure her porridge is not too hot or not too cold. She wants to make sure where she sits or where she lays down to take a nap is not too hard or not too soft. What if we all grew up knowing exactly what we wanted and what is that perfect balance is? Think about that for a moment. We all in our adult life are pursuing our happiness so that we can be successful. Whatever we define our happiness and whatever we define our success to be. The world around us is continually changing, and therefore we need to be able to change and influence others in order to pursue our happiness and pursue our success. Because happiness and success are not things we accomplish alone. Yes, it comes from within, but it also happens in the presence of the rest of the world around us. So, how does Goldilocks connect to my pursuit of my happiness and my purpose and my success? Research shows that we can each only influence 3 levels from where we are. What does that mean? If I am looking at a particular issue and a perspective, and I'm already at the extreme right end, I can only influence people 3 levels towards the center. If I'm already at the extreme left end, I can only influence 3 levels towards the center. Notice, if we are coming from the extremes, the operative word is we can only influence towards the center. If we are not willing to move towards the center, we have nobody to influence. But what if, think about what if I take the time to understand various perspectives and come from somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be dead center, but a little bit left, a little bit right, somewhere within that central margin. And now all of a sudden, I can influence everybody in that center lane, as well as 3 levels to my right, 3 levels to my left. If I can influence 7 levels, 7 degrees of human motivation and human accomplishment, why would I choose to only do 3 and 3 at a much smaller scale? Because I'm already at the extreme of one end or the other. Our goal here on Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks to help you and our Goldilocks community, and through our community, the larger community, to influence everybody to see the value of coming from the middle, and from that centeredness, bring about the change that we each need and we collectively need. And in that pursuit, we can't forget that we are each driving our purpose. Our purpose also is at the intersection or at the center of 3 different components. My purpose or your purpose sits in the center of what you love, what you're great at, and what the world needs. Take a moment and digest that. What you love is what you're going to be passionate about, and it is going to come authentically to you when you do it. When you're great at it, then it's going to be valued by the marketplace, and people are going to want to engage you. And if it's what the world needs, then there is actually an economic value to generate income, right? So what you love, what you're great at, and what the world needs is truly giving you the intersection point of what your purpose is. And that too comes from that centeredness of those 3 components. Today, we're going to be talking about resiliency and how resiliency is important for us to pivot as life and the world around us changes. Resiliency makes us brave. Why is that? When we have taken the time to build the resiliency skills, we can bravely ride into the unknown because the life and the world around us is a great big unknown. All we can see is the 2 or 3 steps ahead of us. Chicago is my adopted home. And in the wintertime, you're lucky if you can see 2 car distances ahead of you as you drive. We don't say, it's too foggy, I can't see, therefore I can't drive. As long as you can see the front of your car and you can see the bumper of the car in front of you, you just carefully drive, because all you need to know is the edge of your front end so that you can move forward without crashing, right? Life is pretty much the same. When we bravely ride into the unknown, we are able to not only make our path, we're creating the path for other people to follow. Nobody said our life has to follow a standard blueprint that somebody else already laid out for us. And we're not living in a time and a world where old blueprints work. As we come out of the pandemic, as we're dealing with the pandemic, business world, the economy, the social world, everything is changing. How are you going to pivot? You're going to pivot with resiliency, and you're going to pivot with brevity. So how are you going to build your braveness, and how is resiliency going to help you is one of the topics we're going to talk today. I talk about it in detail in my Envelope for Success book, but I am so excited to have a wonderful guest all the way from Australia today. And yes, she has woken up in an ungodly hour to have this conversation because she is a part of our Goldilocks community, and she values the ability to help people find that centeredness. Agility and flexibility are integral to pivoting. It is the foundation. And our guest today, Mary Voss, is an expert in helping people understand and acquire the skills of agility and flexibility. As a experienced HR executive and coach, and the person who's helping executives pivot, she is going to share some wonderful insights with us. And keep in mind, agility and flexibility allow us to seamlessly evolve and thrive. We, as humans, are a reflection of evolution, right? We got here through evolution. We're not going to stop with our generation. We're going to continually evolve. And as the world around us changes, we're going to continue to thrive. And we're going to do that with the help of others. And in this process, we are going to transform, and we must. Think about how a caterpillar thinks his life is over. And the moment the caterpillar thinks his life is over, guess what happens? He or she evolves into a beautiful butterfly. That is Mother Nature reminding us that we are each a butterfly. When we get to crossroads of life, we just transform. And how do we do that? How do we transform? To help us through that conversation and help us in that journey, please give a warm-hearted welcome to my special guest, Mary Voss, all the way from Australia. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you, Cass. Thank you.
It is such an honor and a pleasure to have Mary on the show. With her vast experience in helping countless executives all over the world, especially in the Asia Pacific, Australia region. And she brings a wealth of knowledge and cultural expertise. She's able to bring her Asian cultural influence with her Western Australian work experience, and working with people from different parts of the world so that the cultural nuance of how we each interact is also factored in to this whole process. And she advocates to seek first to understand, and she's not at all afraid to ask tough questions. So take a moment and listen to her, and any questions you have, anything you want to share, feel free to save them, because you are going to have an opportunity to have a insightful conversation with her and ask your questions. So Mary, as I bring you on, I really want the audience to hear from you. What brought you into the world of HR? And what truly inspired you and gave you your purpose of helping executives and leaders and emerging leaders find their place through continuous transformation?
Thank you, Cass. Well, I think many will be surprised to say that I did not start off thinking I was going to be in HR. I mean, our careers or our aspirations don't start so obvious from the start. So I was actually an economics graduate, and I started my career in the operations and sales arena with a multinational company. It took someone else to see something in me which I did not see in myself, and suggested that perhaps there's an opportunity for me to contribute by helping others in the human resources function in the company at that time to increase awareness and appreciation on the cross-section of the people function and the business side of things. And that's how I started off as a secondment to the HR function. It was supposed to be for 6 months. But guess what? I got into it. I did it for 6 months. That time I started off in the human resources, the training and org design section. And I just discovered, geez, there's a lot here that I could do and influence outcomes. And it goes without saying, the 6 months turned into a year. And since then, I have not looked back.
Wow. And you bring a unique perspective with your economics background, right? And people forget that everything about a business is hinged on people, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we have products and services. Yes, it's an economic pursuit of profits and long-term value creation, but all of that is done through people. It's our employees who create the business products and services, deliver the process, take care of the customers. At the core of everything is people. So what would you like to tell executives and leaders and even emerging leaders who don't necessarily grasp the importance of that human capital and how that capital drives all the other capital investments of an organization?
Thank you. It's I think it's very easy to be part of an organization because when you look at, the organization exists, you're producing outcomes. And it's so easy that we focus on, I like to use the analogy of the tip of the iceberg. What you see and what you can hear or feel is what you see at the tip of the iceberg. That's the outcome. But beneath the iceberg, there's a lot going on. And all that going on in terms of bringing all the different parts of the organization together, operations, customer servicing, accounting, IT, infrastructure, they don't exist by itself. They don't happen by itself. They rely on the capability, the human capital that you have in the organization in joining the dots, how you bring that together. And of course, if we surround ourselves with the right people, with the right skill set, or even more so, skill set can be learned and acquired, but with the attitude, the willingness to learn and embrace what's ahead, things will just, and that's where magic happens, really. However, finding that magic is not straightforward. What it meant is to bring in, you've got to be very observant, recognizing the talent, the ability of people. And this is where my entry into HR happened, something like that. It's like, I will always remember the country manager, Alan. He mentioned to me that, I see that you like working with people. I see that you relate very well with people. You interact well with our customers and people who are delivering the service. And I would like to see more of that in others who are not in the frontline function. You know, can you come in and help us to see how you could, contribute from the training side of things, how we can join the dots. So it kind of, that's when it increased my awareness about the level of influence. And that is from a contributor trying to create an impact. But for people who are in the leadership roles, leading those functions, sometimes we are too caught up with the results outcome of it that we forget that, in order to get those results, we definitely need to look out for our people, take care of our people and lift them up. If we lift our people up, then definitely the confidence will grow in their own ability. And because normally the best innovation or creation or creativity is not resting on one person or the person who sits at the top, but it comes from everyone else around us. So for me, definitely the benefit of recognizing the talent in people, that itself is a skill set to be acquired, and many more. I mean, if we talk about competencies and all that, there's so much more to go into this, and that itself can be another topic for another time.
Very true.
Yes, but you start to see that we are there for a reason to create impact, and enabling that impact is actually achieving results through others. And that brings about leadership skills and, ability to communicate, to influence, to be there for others. And for me, I like to believe that creating a safe place, not only physically safe, but psychologically safe for others to grow and thrive, makes a world of difference.
Two brilliant ideas that you just shared. I want to go a little deeper on, Mary. One is the entire idea of iceberg, right? What we see at the tip, whether it's a person, whether it's an organization, whether it's a community, that is a result of years and blood and sweat and tears to get there.
Yes.
Right? A lot of times people see somebody doing well professionally and say, oh, you're so lucky. I always remind them luck has nothing to do with it, right? It's consistency. And I love the quote from Aristotle. Aristotle talks about how excellence is a habit, and what we do over and over again is what forms habits, and therefore excellence is a habit. It is not luck, right? So how do we, as an organization, as a subject matter expert, if you were going to guide somebody, how could they go about building that excellence as a habit, not only in themselves, in their teams, and feel free to connect the concept of psychological safety, because without psychological safety, there is nothing. People are going to shut down, almost like how a turtle withdraws into its shell.
Yes. So definitely, how shall I start? I would like to use the analogy of recognizing that the iceberg, is there. And you rightly said it takes years and time to develop, those habits that shows up, that allows you to show up in time of in time where we excel. Now, that recognition itself, I think having the vision, recognizing that everyone has a backstory, everyone has a story that brought them to where they are. And in that regard, in an organization, we have, especially in these days, it's multi-generational. Everyone is different, and our upbringing, our backgrounds are different, our exposure, the way we learn, the way we embrace technology, the way we pivot, how we change and take on transition in lives, they're all different. So to recognizing that there is more to a person than how they show up at work is important. Now, to do that though, is not everyone will be so willing to share what they have been through to be what they are today. So I always believe that as leaders, we need to hold the space, make it safe for people. If others don't respond immediately or contribute immediately, we have a role to make it easy for people, kind of take the initiative, ask the question, invite them along, or even connect them with people that will allow them to open up. So that is at the, at the interpersonal skills level. Now, from a policy making level because I've also been part of organizations where there is a strong appetite to generate policies, create policies. Now, policies don't run companies. We don't hide behind policies, right? And I've also worked in environments where the policy is just one page. But, any policy that they have is simple, easy to understand. The company is thriving. So this is where we start to see that, documentation, policy, bureaucracy, they don't change outcomes. It's the being, how we help the organization and individuals becoming their own. That's the process that brings all the different parts together. So the psychological safety part of it, in Australia especially, we have a very strong work health and safety requirement. Legalistically, we got to fulfill. So sometimes we could fall into the trap of meeting work health and safety requirement, like box ticking exercise. Now, when we get too caught up with that, without focusing on changing the culture around the workplace to make sure that people are taken care of, physical health and well-being are number one priority, then it's quite meaningless. So I would say the inconsistency of practice in the workplace had been challenged by the pandemic. The pandemic, I would like to say is a wicked problem, right? Because there's no blueprint ahead of us to say how we navigate ourselves out of this situation. So it has created a level playing field for all organizations and as well as for individuals. So in order to work ourselves out of a pandemic and at the same time still show up for companies to still show up and contributing and gaining economic interest in the operations or in their chosen field, the well-being part of the people has to be number one. If we don't show that we care for our people, they won't feel safe coming to work. They won't feel included. They won't feel that they're being listened to. So it's there's so many moving parts, and the ability to create that space, to recognize that, and how we mobilize commitment from people, it's something to be considered.
Beautifully said. And I love how you interjected that even an organization, how its being is important. You and I have known each other for a while now, and you hear me talk about how each of us are a being, and who we are being brings out how we do things, right? I talk about it in my book. I talk about it in terms of coaching and training. And this is a place where you and I completely resonate. And I love how you integrate that. And a lot of times organizations forget that they have a character and they are a being. And how they are being is going to influence how the employees are going to be able to function. Have you run into any challenges in helping businesses and business leaders understand the difference? Businesses are not just doing for the outcome, but they are being and creating a culture, which in turn then drives the outcome, right? The outcome is the result, it's not the root cause. And so cause and effect, coming from economics, you fully understand. How do we help the leaders thread the needle?
Thank you. It's a good question, Cass. I believe, given our experience, you and I would have been around the table where this is not something natural for everyone. So advocating to put people first, for example, before economic interests is something that won't happen overnight. And I think this is where our ability to influence and bring others on the journey makes a difference. Of course, we may say that, we need to be better at presentation, putting our thoughts forward. Very often is maybe we need to create better slides. It's a lot of the doing part comes into play. It's about better slides, better statistics, better facts. All those doing part can take up our time. And I think the being part is even when we meet together as a team, so how do we spend some time, ask critical questions, to pause and reflect? Okay, at this point in time, especially the pandemic, for example, I've had business associates sometimes ask me, like, when the pandemic happened, people started to panic. And then when they panic, it was more like reacting from a place of fear. When you come from a place of fear, the mind is actually not thinking straight. And that's when, they get caught up with, yes, definitely, can the business continue to operate in this climate when we're surrounded with a great degree of uncertainty? It really, that's a time when, it takes a lot of convincing to think about, yes, this is happening, but let's, how are we going to bring our people on this journey? But before we can actually say that, we need to find a way to help the leader of the business to remain calm so that it can think clearly, and at the same time, telling him or her that it's okay not to know everything, because it's not possible. This is uncertain times, right? So being able to even say that is so important. Otherwise, the mind is running at, ahead of us before we have even found ourselves to be in a place to think clearly, to find a solution, to get out of a situation. So, where I'm going with this is with regards to holding that space, being able to call, like, it's okay to pause, to say we don't know that we don't know. And this is where we bring out the authenticity in us to have that conversation. If you're willing to express where we are at, sometimes that open doors, in fact, often it opened doors for others to come forward and contribute. It's amazing that individuals who are normally at other times, when business is running as usual, everyone is just running along, doing their own bits. They may not be the ones who are contributing ideas that are outside the box. But if we express our willingness or show our vulnerability, when we show our vulnerability where we don't know which direction we are going, but at the same time, we want to find some clarity, that's when there may be leaders amongst the people that we lead who normally withhold their opinion, come forward and contribute. But that is only possible if we make them feel safe enough and trust that they can trust and not second guess themselves to come forward and contribute their ideas. So this is where that itself, allows other executives as well to consider, to approach a different way to solve problems and embrace, let go of the past. But these are all, it takes time to get there. It won't happen overnight. Holding our own to be able to give the confidence to others that it's okay not to know everything. And therefore, how we all come together to, brainstorm and decide what is the best course of action at this point in time.
Amazing guidance. And I love how you talked about vulnerability. We can't lead if we're not vulnerable, right? It is a fundamental quality of a leader to be authentic and vulnerable, because if we don't do that, we can't hold space for the others. And a lot of times, from a Western perspective, it is a weakness to show vulnerability, right? And we have to pretend we know everything. We have to pretend we know all the answers. And everybody else around us know that we don't have the answers because nobody can see that far out to have answers, right? So we play this game of, make believe, and in the process lose authenticity and lose the ability to build that psychological safety. So I truly appreciate how you connected the dots. What advice would you have for individuals in today's condition, economy, the pandemic, social infrastructure issues, everything? It's almost like Mother Nature said, you people think you've got all this figured out and you're my boss? Let's see what you're going to do now, right? So Mother Nature is pushing us and probing us and forcing us to transform for the better of humanity. And as people try and figure out how to do this, what is your tips, one or two or three tips on how people can go about building resiliency and how they can go about pivoting in a way that is meaningful and relevant?
I like your introduction of Mother Nature.
Mm-hmm.
I think, the pandemic has, all of us have experienced lockdown at some point or the other. Some of us more over a longer period of time, and some shorter period. But whatever it is, we are all familiar with lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
I think the lockdown, to some extent, have asked us to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world in a way. So we have all been sent back to our own environment, to our inner world, to, kind of figure things out.
Yes.
It's very hard when most of us pre-pandemic, I'm speaking for myself, where I wore the badge, being busy was my badge of honor. I get so, it's so easy to fill my diary with things to do and get busy. Now, when we get too busy, we don't create space in our mind to think and reflect. Now, the pandemic, unfortunately or fortunately, has pressed this big pause and asked all of us to, kind of respond differently. So Mother Nature it's like we are living in countries where, for those of us who have moved to live in countries that has 4 distinct seasons, we see the change of season happening. Spring, autumn, summer, each season brings a different change, and we see reinvention happening all the time. But I don't think we really reflected on these things when Mother Nature experienced change when we are too busy. So the pandemic actually has put us in a place of reflection to figure out. Now, the figuring out process, the resilience part, it's when we are working on our inner work, we start to realize that it takes a lot more effort. It's not that just sitting in a corner and you become resilient. It doesn't work like that. Resiliency comes from a place of recognizing, if we are struggling with something, we got to spend some time to reflect and recognize what are our strengths, recognizing that how far we have come. Now, how far we have come includes reflection on, despite the weaknesses or limitations that we may have, despite all that, yet we have showed up very strongly in the past, and we have not given sufficient time to celebrate the strengths. I think it's easy for us to recognize, but when there have been turning points in our life, what made us still show up despite the challenges, despite the difficulty, there are golden nuggets there to be harvested. And I would say the resiliency is being able to just spend time and reflect and identify what those few are for us personally is very powerful. And yes, it's, I think for myself, the resiliency part was when I gave myself permission to accept my strengths, my limitations, my faults from the past, because the failings or inadequacy that we felt in the past actually taught us something. There were lessons to be learned from there, and they're all really powerful stuff. So acceptance of those, the whole self, not just only the bits that we like, but the whole self, enriches and gives us this, you start to realize that you're actually part of Mother Nature. It's like you go through regrowth. So I found myself, whenever I spend time with Mother Nature, it reminds me that I'm part of Mother Nature. Mother Nature is starting off to be enough. When we admire the plants or the trees or the birds, anything that we see and observe, each has its own beauty. And yet it took me a while, actually. For a long time, personally, I allow my inner critic to have a louder voice in my head. So the inner critic, sometimes when they speak so loudly, we tend to forget that we are part of Mother Nature. And yet I'm so willing, for example, to admire the beauty in nature. Now, if I'm doing that with the external world, why am I not expressing the same admiration for the beauty that we have in ourselves? So it's like, if we consider ourselves Mother Nature, then we are part of Mother Nature. So the resiliency comes from, definitely, it's not only showing up to be strong or pretending to be strong, because we are human, we are not perfect. That complete package, acknowledging that, accepting that itself is very empowering. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's true. We are Mother Nature's creation that makes us part of her, right? So whatever we need is already inside of us. And whatever we think we're lacking, the beauty is every person around us is a part of Mother Nature. We just have to lean in.
yes, absolutely.
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful insights. I am going to open this up to our live audience to see if they have any thoughts, any insights, any questions for us. Robin, Melinda, Wolfgang, feel free to share your thoughts or your insights. Questions as well. Go ahead, Robin.
Hello, I'm loving this. I've been taking copious notes, even though my face was off. Had my smiling picture there. I loved just a couple of things. I loved a question where you said at the very beginning that it took someone else in your organization to see something in you that you didn't see in yourself, and that then led you off into this wonderful path that you're in now. And then the other thought, being busy was my badge of honor. I could slap that badge of honor on myself as well. It was great. And so going back to this, someone seeing something in yourself, but also combining that with the notion that you had this econ background and kind of a different background, not an HR background. And so I have an MBA as well as my, with an emphasis in organizational behavior and then applied positive psychology degree. And so I'm wondering, and coming back to the comment that Cass's comment, everything deals with people. So the notion of how can we help people who are in these other fields, say the econs, the quant jocks, as we would call them in our MBA program years ago, people involving other fields, how they can learn more about the human side of business, the human side of engineering, the human side of manufacturing, and still stay in their field, but bring those other elements into it to be more effective in doing what they're doing.
Thank you, Robin, for the question. this is when your question immediately got me thinking, what shall I refer to in my toolkit? Well, what came to mind is actually change management practices. So I, as you know, I practice change management in fact, everything that I do. So part of it is the stakeholder management piece. If you have, in stakeholder management talks about, the change, anyone, regardless, whatever background they're in, any kind of work or contribution that they do in the workplace impact others. So identifying who are the people it has a direct impact on or indirect impact on makes a big difference. Change is change, but change can't be changing for change's sake. Change must be, it is driven for a reason. It is there for a reason. And for change to leave a positive impact, definitely identifying who are the stakeholders becomes very important. And I like to use this practice where I list down my stakeholders. Some clusters may be individuals, names by individuals. Others would be maybe groups of people if they're doing common things. And then, I think about for each of the stakeholder, the change that we're going to deliver, where are they likely to be in the score of acceptance and resistance, or neutral, like, they ambivalent about it, doesn't affect them much, they are staying right in the middle. But if they are people who are likely to have a great impact and they are on the extreme end of, they are not early adopters, they're resistors, the communication strategy, the influence strategy for this group is very, very different to the early adopters of any change. And I've used that technique before in influencing engineers, project managers, the technical people who are more comfortable in the technical space. Of course, when I spoke to them, I did not use that roadmap. I did not put it out there, to say that you work with this, because not everyone likes the tool. But I find myself borrowing that tool as my frame of reference in just asking questions like, this change that you're doing, I'm curious to know, who are the people who are likely you'll need more help from to help move this change along in the organization. And then they will start talking about it. And then, then my follow-up question, depending on their responses, may say that, well, if that's the case, how would you approach someone who is so important to the change, but not willing to come to the party? They have their reasons. They may see you as taking resources away from them, because change normally translates in the mind of, I'm losing something, I'm giving up something. So changing that conversation does get our technical people who are more comfortable in the technical space to reflect a little bit more. And I find that very often when we go into these conversations, they start to engage with, like my experience, they engage directly with me to start, like, more from a curious mindset. Like, they will ask me in return, why did you ask me that question? What prompted you to think about it? Well, then the conversation goes down the path of, well, if you want to get to this outcome, you can't do it. It's a team sport, right? We can't get it there ourselves. We need others to be part of this journey. Who else do you need to enroll or onboard into this change process, or this product or prototype you're going to bring to the market, so that you have more people championing your cause, so to speak. Yeah. And of course, when you talk about the stakeholder side of it, it's not just only people within the organization, but potentially also people outside the organization. And they may include your suppliers, a partner organization, or even having to lobby with local communities. So that whole change concept on the people that we impact grows. And it's so important, though, we don't want to overwhelm the people who are leading, implementing the change as well. And so that's when going through a process of trade-off you know, or prioritization. If we, within this 3 months, let's say if that's all the time that we have, then who are the people who are most significantly that we need to influence to get an outcome? Because sometimes we may not be the only person who have to be the one influencing the change. If we can influence a small group of people, they go on to influence the others in their circle. I hope that helps with the in responding to the question.
Oh yeah, in fact, I'm facing something, a slightly different angle, but kind of similar at work. And what you just said is like, oh my gosh, that's what I needed to hear right now. So
Okay.
thank you, thank you.
I am so happy. And Robin, thank you as always for asking wonderfully insightful questions. And Mary, that was fantastic the way you answered. Coming from a finance world, I am one of those numbers jocks, right, Robin? So the way I look at it is we respond to logic. People who choose numbers fields normally, not always, normally prefer to work with facts and logic than people who are somehow assumed to be illogical, right? We as human beings are not always logical. So when we're dealing with numbers people, it helps to take a logical step-by-step probing process that Mary so insightfully outlined. And I would really love to ask Wolfgang to jump in here, because Wolfgang is an engineer by trade from Guatemala, coming from the Latin culture. And now he is at one of the Berkshire Hathaway's largest brands, Duracell, running the HR function for the entire Latin America region, and actually driving the pivoting and the changing and resiliency building in the middle of the pandemic. So Wolfgang, I am going to put you on the spot and have you share some insights with us.
Thank you, Dr. Cass. First of all, it's a pleasure to see you, Dr. Cass, that you're doing well. And I can't wait to meet you sometime in Belize.
Oh, my joy.
And Dr. Vass, it's a pleasure. I was doing my walk, so I couldn't take notes. So if you see a little, sorry, I was walking out in 80, almost 90-degree weather and humidity, but I just sat down in my house, and so it's a pleasure to hear your perspective. Yeah, definitely, it's been I'm one of those converted logical people into heart people. But I think I was always a heart person. Just eventually found my calling. But yeah, the resiliency in the time of COVID is oh my goodness. You know, that's when you I think you mentioned it forces us to get out of our treadmill, if you will, or flywheel of activity, and really look around and appreciate who we have around us, not only our family members, but our coworkers and our even people that are distant. Like I deal a lot with people in Chile, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and other places. And that closeness, we have to have that closeness call, whatever you want to call it, when we don't really talk about what's going on with the business, but what's going on with you, you know? And so that allows us to feed ourselves from each other's stories of how they're handling the situations, how they're handling the confinement, because all of our countries are at different places when it comes to the confinement. So definitely agree with you, and appreciate the perspective that you are bringing to us. So thank you. I did have a question, because I understand you're an executive coach, for what I understood. So what do you think, or what is not you think, well, your experience, what is the most important skill that you bring as an HR practitioner into an executive coach activity?
Thank you, Wolfgang, for that question. Recently, I've been working with a client, which is an up and coming executive, and one of the skill set, not really skill set, or rather the awareness that I brought in our conversations was about visualization. So the visualization part was important, because otherwise it's so easy to get caught up in the drama. You know, in the workplace, sometimes you have all kinds of things happening, and if you're not balanced, if you're not careful with the balance where we spend our time, we can get caught up with things that it's generating noise. It's not really focusing on what matters. So for this executive I was talking to, I said to him, let's do this visualization exercise. I kind of convinced him to do this visual board, like asking him, imagine if just pick a time in some point in the future. At a personal level, I don't know, maybe pick a time when you're 80. If you work backwards, visualizing if you're 80, how do you want to live your life at that point in time? Who do you see yourself surrounding yourself with? What kind of conversations are you having? And I was trying to describe to him where he sees himself when he's happiest and most at peace. So we kind of went through that exercise, and then he kind of had light bulb moments from that. So then I worked with him to, okay, let's bring that closer, bring the timeline closer to you at this point in your current workplace. If you were to visualize, if you have that magic wand, and if you can change something within your control, what would that be like? So he went through that visualization exercise and said, well, in 90 days from today, if I can do something differently, this is how I see my project going. So I asked him to describe for me, okay, what do you see in the meeting room if your project is going this way? So I kind of got him to be far more descriptive about how successful the project would be, to break it down. So to visualize that, who was in the room with you having that conversation? What were the kind of words or expressions used in that meeting? How different is that conversation how different is that conversation from the one that you're having today? Because today he's currently in a bit of a difficult situation because of a few difficult personalities that he's dealing with. So kind of when we started to talk about it that way, he started to have a bit of an awareness and said, you know what? I think I'm going to approach this problem a different way. So he already had that response. He already had that answer in him, but somehow got caught up with the drama that was generated from everywhere else and got stuck, right? And when you're stuck, we can't think clearly. We can't think outside the box. So the visualization process kind of helped him to pause. Okay, let's take a step back. If you take a balcony view, and if you're the executive, you can look ahead of yourself. Where do you want to be? And then we work backwards. And when we started to work backwards, he started to engage with other tools and skill set that he had. He said, actually, I never thought about, inviting this other person that I had a distance and engagement with to this other meeting that I was going to call. I said, oh, why not? What was stopping you? Because he was not part of the project. But why suddenly are you thinking of this person? Well, because so-and-so is connected to the other members in the team, and it just went from there. So the next thing is I didn't have to do much, because all I did was I invited him. I created that space to make him feel safe to reimagine the future using visualization, to think about at that point in time, what would that be? And we work backwards. And the rest is working that plan.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's a great insight. Thank you.
That is brilliant guidance, Mary. And I believe everybody can use that particular nugget of wisdom in all aspects, right? If we visualize what our 75, 80-year-old self is going to be like to be happy, and then walk back to see, then what do we need to do today to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
It truly gives us a vision for where we need to be, and then mindfully build that. So brilliant, brilliant guidance. I cannot thank you enough for getting up so early before dawn to join us and have this conversation with us. And it is truly an honor and a pleasure to have your insights, and cannot wait to, I'm sure we'll bring you back another time to talk about various other things, because your insights and guidance are going to be so incrementally valuable for all of us as we look at our futures. And, having an executive coach among us is a wonderful gift for the Goldilocks community. Thank you for making yourself available, and thank you so much for sharing with an open heart a powerful, powerful conversation. As we bring this show to a close, I would love to thank everybody, our live audience, our Facebook audience, our listeners who are going to go and watch us on YouTube, and all the others who are going to be engaging with us. Thank you for making the time. And if you've gotten anything out of today, it is a consistent message of finding your purpose, coming from the centeredness of your purpose, and getting out of the naughty corner we all put ourselves in because we want to isolate ourselves, right? And take a page from Mother Nature's lessons here and go out there and transform lives. Go out there and transform lives. And in the process, remember to transform yourself, because it is through transforming yourself that you are going to be resilient, that you are going to thrive, and you are going to leave a mark in this world.